Thank you for joining our Debbie Stream Foundation Curing Stomach Cancer webinar on the role of clinical trials for cancer patients. Clinical trials are the primary means by which new cancer treatments are developed, tested, and approved. In this webinar, you will learn why a clinical trial may be right for you, understand the different phases of and common terms used in clinical trials, and hear tips on our matching service that is available through our website. I am Mary Margaret Kilmeyer, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I am the Patient Resource Manager from Debbie Stream Foundation Curing Stomach Cancer. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and recently completed my doctorate. My clinical and research background is focused on working collaboratively with doctors, patients, their families, and members of a healthcare team. We would like to thank Genentech for providing funding to make this webinar possible. We would also like to thank our promotional partners, the American Association for Cancer Research, the Anti-Cancer Club, Cure Magazine, the Esophageal Cancer Action Network, Meals to Heal, and Patient Resource. You will be able to ask questions during this presentation. You can type your question into the white text box that appears on your screen. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will address questions as time allows. If we don't have time to address your question today, we will try to address it during our next webinar taking place on October 7th at 12:45 Eastern Time. In addition, the recording of this webinar will be accessible on our website. Shawanda Manuel-Braham recently joined the DDF team as our Program Director. She will be co-moderating today's webinar. First, I will introduce Debbie Zellman, who will share with you her journey and information about Debbie Stream Foundation. Then Caroline Melendez will present Demystifying Clinical Trials, and then there will be time for a question and answer session at the end. I would now like to introduce the President and Founder of Debbie Stream Foundation, Debbie Zellman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer in April of 2008. At that time, I was only 40 years old. I was the mother of 3 young children, married to a physician and a practicing attorney with my own firm. I had no risk factors for stomach cancer, and my symptoms were very vague. My chance of being alive in 5 years was only 4%. I'm happy to tell you, however, that it has been 7 years since my diagnosis, and however, I have had 5 recurrences during that 7 years. And you should all know that I am still currently a patient receiving chemotherapy. Next slide. In April 2009 is when I started Debbie Stream Foundation Curing Stomach Cancer. We are now members of the Deadliest Cancers Coalition, the Patient Equal Access Coalition, the State Patient Equal Access Coalition, and One Voice Against Cancer. I'm also a patient advocate on the National Cancer Institute Esophagogastric Task Force, the NCI Patient Advocacy Steering Committee, the NCCN Gastric and Esophageal Guidelines Committee, the CDMRP Department of Defense Peer Review Cancer Research Program Integration Panel, the American Society for Clinical Oncology HER2 Testing Guidelines Project in gastric cancer, and I also serve as a stakeholder for the American Cancer Society Research Program. However, most notably, people tell me I've appeared on Dr. Oz in a program about stomach cancer. Next slide. So here are some facts about stomach cancer. People don't know that worldwide, stomach cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer death, second in men and fourth in women, and it affects nearly 1 million people worldwide, and approximately 700,000 of those people will die. In America, 24,000 approximately will be diagnosed with stomach cancer this year, and more than 11,000 will die. However, stomach cancer is on the rise in young people ages 25 to 39. But per cancer death in the U.S., stomach cancer receives the least amount of federal funding of any cancer. Before we started Debbie Stream Foundation, there were few resources and support services for stomach cancer patients, and most people knew very little about this deadly disease. Next slide. So our mission with Debbie Stream Foundation is to change all that. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness about stomach cancer, advancing funding for research, and providing education and support internationally to families, patients, and caregivers, with the ultimate goal to make the cure for stomach cancer a reality. Our website is www.debbiestream.org. Next slide. I'm happy to tell you that we have already achieved many milestones in our 6 short years of existence, including a free patient resource education program that we call PrEP. which prepares hundreds of patients, families, and caregivers throughout the world by matching the inquirer with another survivor or caregiver using specific disease criteria, such as biomarker, stage, gender, age, region, and role. In addition, we offer lots of other free services for those patients, families, and caregivers, including free symposia and webinars. And all webinars and symposium lectures are housed on our website. We have 27 chapters in the United States, Canada, and Germany, and we hold events across the United States and Canada. I'm happy to tell you that we have directly funded research, and the amount on there is a little outdated. We are now up to $350,000 in research grant funding. We have hosted 3 stomach cancer Capitol Hill advocacy days in the United States, along with the first ever Capitol Hill briefing about stomach cancer. I'm also happy to tell you that our advocacy has been very effective, and we were able to get stomach cancer added to the Department of Defense peer-reviewed cancer research program, which is a $50 million pot of money for stomach cancer research. In addition, our website contains in-depth stomach cancer information, including the lecture library, the clinical trials information and matching service that you're going to hear a lot about today, a stomach cancer support community that is a one-of-a-kind support community, blog topics, and resources. And the whole website is translatable into more than 60 languages if you go to the bottom of the website. Again, www.debustream.org. Next slide. So this is a screenshot of the homepage of the website, the very top of the website, with a lot of very easily clickable buttons and very easily navigable for you. Next slide. So at this time, I'm going to turn the webinar back over to our very wonderful moderator, Mary Margaret Kilmeyer, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Debbie. As you can see on your screen, there are several events throughout the remainder of this year and across the country for you to get involved in. Taking place on September 21st in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is our Dream Big Luncheon. Then in Chicago on September 27th, we will be having a team participate in the half marathon and 5K. Also in Chicago on November 7th is our Chicago Stomach Cancer Education Symposium. This is a free event and an educational event for patients, caregivers, and family members to participate and join in on. It is an opportunity to hear from the leading experts in stomach cancer who will be speaking on different topics such as chemotherapy and treatment options, surgical options, nutrition and side effect management. And again, this is a completely free event. If you are not in the Chicago area or not able to attend the event in person, this is also a live webcast internationally for free for anyone to view. On November 8th will be the New York Night of Laughter, and then on November 13th is the International Stomach Cancer Genes Day. In 2016, we will also have a team participating in the Miami Marathon and Half Marathon. To learn more about these and other events that are taking place, please visit the events page of our website, again, www.wstream.org. WStream Foundation is headquartered in Davie, Florida. Our office is open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. On this slide, you will also see important phone numbers and email addresses to contact our office. We will start the presentation on demystifying clinical trials. Our presenter is Caroline Melendez of EmergingMed. Caroline is the Director of Client Services at EmergingMed. In 2005, Caroline joined the team as a clinical trial navigator. She has over 15 years of experience as an advocate in a broad range of settings. In addition to her work with cancer patients, Caroline's background includes overseeing workshops and trainings in various roles in the medical field. As the Director of Client Services, she works with advocacy groups, cancer centers, and trial sponsors. Caroline's goal is to help her clients best utilize EmergingMed's navigation services so every patient can be empowered and informed about their options. Caroline resides in Manhattan with her husband and son. And at this time, I would now like to turn the webinar over to Caroline Melendez.
Thank you, Mary Margaret. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you guys today. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to be talking to you about when and where to search for clinical trials. what is currently out there. We're going to briefly touch on targeted therapies and tumor profiling, and then we'll have time for some questions. Next slide. So really, my goal today, well, we're going to cover a couple of things, is to arm you with information on how to navigate the world of clinical trials within gastric cancers. I know that right now a clinical trial may or may not be right for you, but I really want to encourage you to make sure to get educated and remember to search really every time you're making a treatment decision. Next slide. All right, so as I said, I want you to search every time you're making a treatment decision, and it's really at all these points. So whether you're first diagnosed just before surgery or radiation, after surgery or radiation, when you learn your cancer has spread or reoccurred, or when you're getting your results from your regular scans or tests. And the reason we want you to do this is we never want to hear you say, oh, I wish I had known about that sooner. That happens a lot to us, especially when I was on the phone speaking to cancer patients directly. When you were making a treatment decision, what you decide to do will change your options for clinical trials in the future. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, but we want you to be aware of every option before you make a treatment decision and proceed. Next slide. So where should you search? As Mary Margaret mentioned, EmergingMed operates the W Stream Foundation Clinical Trial Matching Service. And what we do is we help patients match to trials based on their specific diagnosis and treatment history. The service is absolutely free to patients, family members, friends, health professionals. There are two ways you can search, as you can see here. You can either search by phone and speak to a clinical trial navigator who will walk you through the entire process, or you can begin your search online. Today, what I want to do is just give you a little sneak peek into the steps that you would take if you were to log on today to W Stream Foundation and start your search for trials. Next slide. So the first step is setting up a secure password-protected account. This is a step some people may not like because you actually have to put in your name and your email and create a password that you would have to remember. However, we take health information very seriously. We want to make sure that all of your information is secure, and we never share any of your information that you do provide us. Next slide. So next you're going to create a profile. And this is really handy if, unfortunately, you're in the situation of looking for more than one person. But here you'll select your diagnosis, so whether it's esophageal or stomach cancer. You'll pick who the profile is for, whether you're looking for yourself or a loved one. And then you'll also get a chance to enter in a zip code. And this is helpful for us to help identify the closest trial to you or to the patient. We'll learn a little bit more about that location search in a moment. Next slide. So after creating a profile, you're going to be taken to a disease-specific questionnaire. And the next couple of slides are really just to give you an idea of the type of questions that we ask. It's not complete, but I wanted you to have a little bit of an idea of what you would be needing to answer when you log online. So basic stuff, patient's date of birth, their gender. We want to know about their activity level. You know, it makes a big difference whether they can get dressed every day by themselves or if they're confined to a better chair for more than half the day. That's definitely important in terms of participating in a trial, so we gather that information. We also gather information about the diagnosis, when they were diagnosed, which this is actually a stomach questionnaire, I should point out. What section of the stomach is affected by the tumor? We also ask about biomarkers. Next slide. You can see here that we ask questions about if the cancer has spread, and if it has, where has it spread to? We want to know about the tumor currently. Can it be measured? That's also a very important point for participating in a trial. A lot of trials want the tumor to be measurable because they want to be able to measure whether or not the treatment was successful. Next slide. All right, so after you complete the questionnaire and submit, you will get to see your matches. So there are a couple of things I want to point out about the matches here. First of all, our database includes all oncology treatment and supportive care trials in the U.S. and Canada. We're a licensee of NCI, which means we have all the information that's in clinicaltrials.gov or better. A lot of times we work with sponsors directly, and therefore we have more accurate information, especially contact information for the trial site. So we realized that seeing these matches can be a bit overwhelming. You can see here for this particular questionnaire that I completed, I've narrowed it down, but there are originally 258 trials. That's a lot. That's a lot for anyone to handle, especially when you're dealing with a diagnosis. So it's key that you actually get on the phone with a navigator to help you make this more manageable. As you can see here, there's several things that you can look at. If you click on the title link, you'll be able to read more about the study. You can see the modalities, what type of therapy is it, whether it's chemotherapy or a biological therapy. And then I want to point out the location column over to the right. So I mentioned earlier the zip code is really key, and this is to help us narrow down the closest site to you for that trial. So you can see here for my locations with the zip code I entered, they're all about 2 miles away from me. And there's a link there where you can change the location. So say, for example, I didn't have a site that was close enough to me, but my sister's city did. So you can search for a different location. A lot of times patients can't participate in their area, but they have a family or friend where they could, move to, and would be able to make that feasible for them to participate in a trial. All right. So next slide. Let's go ahead and talk about the Navigator and why you should connect with them. So there are a couple ways you can get in touch with the Navigator. Our phone number that we answer Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 Eastern Time is available all over the website. You can also submit a contact form, and this is where you'll give us your information, permission to contact you, and then the Navigator will be in touch with you. If you do this within business hours, you're generally going to hear back within an hour or two. Next slide. All right, so the role of a navigator. They do lots of things, and I should mention first that EmergingMed uses the case management model, and what that means is we will work with the patient or family member as long as they like. You have the same navigator throughout your entire process, and ideally, we would be connecting with you every time you're making a treatment decision to update your profile, which is your questionnaire, and see what trials might be appropriate at that time. So if you're doing this over the phone, the navigator is going to work with you to complete that questionnaire. So they're going to be listening to your story, answering those questions as you speak to them. If you're doing this on web and you end up speaking to a navigator, they're going to review the questionnaire and ask you some questions. Sometimes a family member filling it out doesn't have much information and answers not sure for a lot of the questions, which is completely understandable. However, that means that the matches are not going to be that great. So if we're missing some information, the navigator is going to work with you, the patient or the family member or friend, to really empower them on how to go back to the healthcare professional and gather this information. We also provide basic education about clinical trials, as well as logistics. How do I get to the site? How often do I have to go to the site? Are there resources to help me get there? Those sort of things. And as I mentioned before, we do provide long-term follow-up. And I realized I missed a really big one here. Navigators provide you actual contact details for the trial site. So as you recall before, on my trial match page, you could see that the locations were in New York City, but it doesn't show you any contact information. We do that for a number of reasons. We want to make sure that we are giving you studies. I'm sorry about that. We want to make sure that we are giving you trial matches that are worth your while, as well as the trial site's while for you to speak to them about. So once you speak to the navigator, they'll be putting you in touch with the trial sites directly. They'll be giving you the institution's name, the location, also the study coordinator's contact information. So you'll be able to contact them directly. And with this follow-up that we provide, we can help ensure that you're actually able to successfully connect with that site. If there's a situation where you've left a couple of messages with a study coordinator, for example, and you haven't heard back, the navigator will be able to help you troubleshoot. And in some cases, they'll even bring it back to me so I can reach out to the sponsor and work through that to make sure that you are able to speak to that site and gather more information. Next slide. Okay, so what's out there? As of the middle of last month, there were 37 clinical trials specifically for stomach cancer patients, and that's really what I'm going to focus on is gastric cancer for this particular section of the presentation. So out of these 37, they range in phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. However, you'll see in a moment that the majority of them are in phase 2. And then there are also hundreds of phase 1 solid tumor trials that are accepting stomach cancer patients. And that is really why, as you saw earlier on my matches, I had 258 matches. And the majority of those would be those solid tumor studies. And again, a Navigator can help you narrow this down and make it manageable and give you bite-sized pieces of information to make sure that you can actually take action on your search. Next slide. All right, so first I'm going to cover the phases, and some of you may already be aware of this, especially if you've listened to these webinars previously. But real quickly, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So phase 1 studies are really to look at what's a safe dose of the treatment. They look to decide on how the new treatment should be given, and they also start to look at how the new treatment affects the body. They usually enroll a very few number of patients, maybe 12. So it's going to be very, very small, and they usually take place at one trial site. Phase 2 is starting to study the effectiveness of the new treatment, and they also continue to observe how the new treatment affects the body. Phase 3, they're going to be comparing the new treatment with the current standard of treatment. And what that is what's the general practice out there today for a patient in that setting. And there they're really comparing the safety as well as the effectiveness. And they're also phase 4 trials. And we're not going to talk about these today, but just so you know, they're really meant to determine the long-term safety and effectiveness of the treatment. Next slide. All right, so these 37 trials are offered across the treatment continuum. And what I mean by that is the trials are available for a different number of treatment settings, as you can see here. And I'm going to just go through what these treatment settings mean, as some of these terms may not be familiar to you. So neoadjuvant, a treatment in a neoadjuvant setting is going to be treatment that's given before the primary therapy. So for example, treatment given before surgery. Adjuvant is going to be treatment given after the primary therapy. So maybe you've had surgery or radiation, and then you are going to receive adjuvant treatment. Treatment in the locally advanced setting is going to be any treatment that's given for the cancer after it's spread from its original location to either nearby tissue or lymph nodes. Treatment under locally recurrent is going to be any treatment that's given once the cancer has come back at or nearby its original location. First-line metastatic is any treatment given after the cancer has spread or metastasized. So this is different than locally advanced. This means it's spread a little bit further in the body. Second-line metastatic would be the second treatment given after the cancer has spread. And as you can see here, the majority of the trials that are taking place are in the later stages. And this is most likely due to the fact that the majority of patients are diagnosed at an advanced stage. Next slide. All right, so we're going to look a little closer at these 37 trials. So 26 of the 37 trials are testing a targeted agent, either alone or in combination with systemic chemotherapy. And targeted agents, maybe some of you are familiar with them, but they identify and attack specific types of cancer cells with less harm to normal cells. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The remaining 11 trials are testing different combinations of chemotherapies, radiation techniques, and surgical procedures. Next slide. All right, so targeted therapies and molecular profiling. These are terms you probably have heard of, although you may not be completely sure what they mean. The main point today really that I want you to take away from it is that the more you know about your specific cancer, so if you can identify biomarkers of your cancer, your tumor type, you're going to be better equipped to make decisions about your treatment. Next slide. All right, so what is a targeted therapy? Targeted therapy uses drugs or other substances, sometimes known as agents, to identify and attack specific types of cancer cells with less harm. So how do they do this? So some of them block the action of certain enzymes, proteins, or other molecules that are involved in the growth and spread of cancer cells. Others help the immune system kill the cancer cells or deliver toxic substances directly to the cells and kill them. Now, generally speaking, targeted therapies may have fewer side effects than other types of cancer treatment, simply based on how they work. Next slide. So in terms of targeted therapy within stomach cancer today, so far scientists and clinicians have identified and developed drugs for over 20 molecular targets. These drugs work to block key growth pathways used by cancer cells or, as I mentioned, modify the immune system to attack the cancer. And there are actually 2 examples of already approved targeted therapies for stomach and GEJ. Those include trastuzumab and ramucirumab. And both of these are monoclonal antibodies. And monoclonal antibodies are antibodies that are produced in the lab. And as you may know, our body fights infection by producing a large amount of antibodies. So basically, they're souping up your system to be able to fight the cancer better, basically. All right, next slide. All right, so the key takeaway here really is for you to make sure that you're searching for trials every time you're making a treatment decision. And even today, if you're not in one of these situations, maybe you're not newly diagnosed and you're on treatment and things are going well, or you're in remission and things are going great, I would really encourage you to start today by visiting debbiestream.org and going to the Clinical Trial Matching Service to start your profile. It doesn't cost you anything, just a couple of minutes of your time, and you can have that profile there, so when you need it, you can just update it and be ready to make those decisions in a really educated and empowered fashion. All right, so that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Caroline, thank you so much for that presentation and demonstration also of the website. There are a few questions, and I'm going to turn the webinar over to Shawanda to read the questions that were sent in during your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mary Margaret. And also thank you, Carolyn, for a great presentation. The first question is there a report of my matches that I can bring to my doctor?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, so what you can do is either print them online. You can actually download them and print them out. Or you can speak to one of the clinical trial navigators, and they will actually email them to you along with the contact information. And we do really encourage you to take this information to your healthcare provider and have a discussion about whether or not trials are right for you. I know that from my experience speaking to cancer patients, physicians are not always supportive. However, they are the ones that have been treating you, and it's really important to get their opinion. Great question.
Great. The next question is there a way to be notified of new trials?
Yes, there is. So when you're creating a profile online, or if you speak to a navigator, you're going to be asked if we can contact you in the future via email about new studies that might be appropriate for you. So we definitely want to be able to reach back out to you. Even if you haven't connected with us lately, if there's something new and you wanted to know about it, we want you to know about it so you can learn more about it, even if it's not an appropriate time for you to look at that trial.
How frequently does that occur?
Well, I think it depends on your questionnaire and kind of where you're at with your diagnosis and treatment history. Trials don't open up every day. So it would probably be maybe once or twice a year that you would be contacted. Unfortunately, this is a very long process to get trials open and moving. But when it does occur, we definitely want to make sure that you're informed and in the know so you can make the best treatment decision.
Thank you for that response. The next question is, does anyone from EmergingMed speak to my healthcare team?
We do if they contact us. We are all about patient privacy, and we will work with whoever the patient wants us to work with. A lot of times healthcare providers contact us directly about their patients. Other times we may be working with a patient or family member, and they want us to connect with a physician, and we're happy to do so. they'll just be able to give the physician our contact information, whether it's the Navigator's email or phone number, and they're more than happy to speak to them about the questionnaire and the process in which trials might be appropriate.
Okay. And the next question I have, can EmergingMed speak to me in depth about my matches?
Yes, we can definitely talk to you about your matches. We can help you narrow them down and make them more manageable. However, we are not experts in every single trial. So the only information we can provide you about a specific study is what is publicly available. And if you have any more questions than that, we would refer you to your physician or to the trial site directly.
Caroline, thank you so much for those answers and a really wonderful presentation. Again, this presentation will be available on our website for people to view as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, this webinar was brought to you by Debbie Stream Foundation, Curing Stomach Cancer. Thank you to our speaker, Caroline Melendez of EmergingMed, and to Genentech for providing funding that helped make this webinar possible. As you see on your screen, we have upcoming events to get involved in and support. Details about these events are available on the Debbie Stream website at www.debbiestream.org. Thank you to all of our listeners today. Our next clinical trials webinar will be held on October 7th at 12:45 Eastern Time. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and thoughts before then. Please send your comments to patient.resource@debbiestream.org. Thank you again for joining us.